Alors bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à notre rencontre du comité.
Hello everyone, welcome to this meeting of the Standing Committee on Agriculture. This afternoon we have the honour of welcoming the Minister, Marie-Claude Bibeau. Very happy to have you with us this afternoon, Minister, to talk about the supplementary estimates. Minister, the floor is yours for your opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great pleasure to be back here with the committee. We are all very passionate and committed to agriculture. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your commitment. You very quickly got down to work to discuss business risk management programs, an issue that's extremely important to our farmers. And topic
is working hard to support producers and help grow the Canadian agriculture sector. And the supplementary estimates we are discussing today are proof of that. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada supplementary estimates total an amount of $435 million for a total annual budget of close to $3 billion. Of that amount, we are investing $345 million in the first installment of the full and fair compensation we committed to our dairy producers for the impact from our trade agreements with the European Union and the Trans-Pacific Zone. The estimates also includes $21.4 million to meet increased demand for the advance payment programs. These funds are related to the improvements we made last year at the APP, including increasing the interest-free cash advances available to canola producers from $100,000 to $500,000, and to raise the total advances available for canola and all other commodities to $1 million, up from $400,000. Ces changements étaient demandés depuis longtemps.
This changes, farmers had been asking for these changes for a long time because it would give them more liquidity. We're very proud of having been able to enhance our support. Moreover, $55.3 million will be added to the Canadian Partnership for Agriculture to give provinces more flexibility in implementing regional programs.
I care deeply about our Canadian farmers. They have been incredibly resilient in the face of stressful challenges this past year. Poor seeding and harvesting conditions in many parts of the country, market access challenges, including canola in China, then rail strike, followed by the blockades, resulted in difficulties moving products to market, accessing input supplies, and affected profitability. We worked hard to reach a lasting and peaceful solution, and it is encouraging to see commodities moving again. We are closely monitoring impacts of the coronavirus on the agriculture sector. This is a global challenge, and with the help of the recently announced Response Fund, we are well positioned to respond. Trade is a key priority for our farmers, and we continue to work hard to help capture the amazing opportunities that lie ahead. Our efforts are paying off. Last year, Canada's agriculture, food, and seafood exports reached over $67 billion, continuing growth towards reaching our goal of $75 billion exports by 2025. The value of Canadian grain exports have increased by 25% since 2016. Our cattle and beef exports were up by over 20%, and in Japan, they rose by almost 70% as producers begin to reap the benefits of the CPTPP. While we continue to diversify our trade, we are working to strengthen our relationship with our largest trading partner to the south. Last month, Secretary Perdue and I discussed the importance of the new NAFTA and our commitment to ratify it as soon as possible. Hundreds of thousands of jobs rely on this trade relationship. And I also reminded the Secretary of the importance and value of Canada's supply management system. Évidemment, le soutien de
Clearly, government support for farmers is not limited to a support for trade. Sectors under supply management are receiving the promised compensation. Over $345 million have been disbursed in direct payments to dairy producers, in addition to investment programs for processors and farmers. Total support amounts to $423 million this year. We are working with farmers and producers to provide funding according to their preferences. We're also improving our federal, provincial, territorial business risk management programs. That is my top priority, as set forth in my mandate letter. I take the opportunity to thank the committee for this study. I hope that your work will be constructive, your recommendations will be taken into account, and I hope that your work will contribute to improving these programs for farmers so we can help them more effectively.
We have made some immediate improvements to agri-stability. Starting this year, private insurance payments won't count against farmers' agri-stability payments. As well, we have asked officials to look at each and every program and tell us whether they are meeting their objective, and if not, identify gaps. Farmers face new business risks, trade and climate to name, have more impact on today's farms. I also look forward to the committee's review of BRM programs. Together, we will help to ensure that they deliver for our farmers. Les producteurs me disent que la protection de l'environnement fait partie de leur ADN.
Farmers tell me that environmental protection is inherent in their very nature because they grow food not only for today but for future generations. They need access to new green technologies, better products and practices.
Environmental sustainability. For example, last week on Prince Edward Island, we partnered with the province to announce a joint investment under the Agricultural Clean Technology Program. The funding will help organic greenhouse producers to transition to 100% clean energy. Sustainability is not only about environment. For farmers, sustainability is also economic and social, and that includes mental health. When I talk about diversification, I think in terms of markets, but also a wide range of products, value added. Investing in innovation is another way to increase the demand and to get more money for the products we have. Dans le cadre de la politique alimentaire pour le Canada, nous travaillons aussi pour...
Moreover, we're working to increase confidence and pride in our products through a new Buy Canadian campaign, which includes an investment of $25 million in the Canadian food policy. Mr. Chairman, we need to work together to help the next generation of farmers and processors be ready. I'm working with Finance Canada to facilitate the intergenerational transfer of farms. A family farm is a lifetime's work, and we have to help the next generation take up the torch. We need more diversity of perspectives around the table because we all see challenges differently. To encourage our young people to take a leading role, I'm very happy to be launching the new Youth Farmers Council of Canada.
Communities about their vision for agriculture. We must give them what they need to succeed. The future belongs to them. Likewise, we need more women in leadership positions in agriculture. It's encouraging to see more and more women stepping forward. Their perspective is vital to help shape a sustainable future for our industry. Mr. Chair, I understand the pressures faced by producers along with higher levels of stress. Canadian farmers work hard to feed us. I'm inspired by their resilience, their ability to innovate, and their respect for the environment and animal welfare. These women and men deserve our greatest respect. I know that everyone around this table is committed to doing everything in our power to ensure that they have a future full of promise for them and for the coming generations. Je tiens à remercier le comité pour votre dévouement.
I'd like to thank the committee for your commitment to agriculture and for your cooperation. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I would like to welcome Mr. Chris Forbes, the Deputy Minister, and Ms. Christine Walker, Assistant Deputy Minister.
Questioning round, and we'll start with Mr. John Barlow for up to 6 minutes, and you want a 4-minute warning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Minister, and Chris and Christine for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. But Minister, I'm glad you spoke about mental health and anxiety that is going on within the agriculture sector right now, and a big part of that is some of the policy that has been put in place, but that is also impacting the health of our rural communities and our rural economy. And I think I really want to stress this, that you need to understand that, especially in Western Canada, when the energy sector is successful, agriculture is successful because those rural communities are thriving. And I have to ask you that you didn't have the opportunity to answer today is why were you lobbying against the Tech Frontier mine
Mr. Chair,
in rural
point of
Alberta?
The member knows very well that the minister cannot answer.
I'm just giving her an opportunity to answer a question.
Rumors
she didn't have to
about
answer
cabinet
today.
discussion cannot be answers.
She can answer that, Mr.
No,
Drouin.
you know very well that cabinet
answer.
discussions are not discussed and could be susceptible to criminal investigation. So I am just warning the member, if that's the line of questioning that he will go on.
That is one question. I'm just asking.
It is not acceptable to this committee.
Thank you. So although the supplementary estimates, I mean, it's quite wide. We have invited the minister to talk about things that matter with the supplementary estimates. So I would just like to the members to keep that in as their focus and not go straight to other. So let's go, Mr.
I appreciate that. I was just giving the minister an opportunity to answer that, but that's fine. If she doesn't want to answer that, I will say then, Minister, one of the issues you did bring up over the last few months and was you're looking for more data and more evidence to make a decision on the carbon tax and maybe expanding the exemption, which could have an impact on the budget, expanding the exemptions for farm fuels to include propane and natural gas. And you had commented on several occasions that you're looking for more data on what that would be. We have certainly had that data now for many of our stakeholder groups. APAS has shown that the carbon tax would be a loss of 12% of their revenue. Keystone Agri Producers in Manitoba said it's already paid close to $2 million in carbon taxes just for grain drying. Hog farmers in Manitoba are saying it's going to cost between $2 and $2.6 million a year. What more do you need to make that decision that this is having a detrimental impact on agriculture for you to make a decision on whether or not you're going to include natural gas and propane in the farm fuel exemptions?
Yeah, so last December, my provincial counterparts and the representatives of the industry were asking me to convince my colleagues, I would say, to have an exemption for the price on pollution on the energy needed to dry grains. So at that time, I had some data from the department, but I wanted to get more from the industry and from my provincial colleagues to see if I had a business case to make. And I told them if I have a business case demonstrating that the price on pollution on grain drying have a significant impact on farmers, I would make the case to my colleagues and see what we can do. And at the end, when I received the information, if you look only at the price on pollution on grain drying, it's less than 1% of the operations of the average farm. The numbers I have received go much further or wider than that. They have presented me with more data around the direct and the impact of the price and pollution of direct and even indirect costs to farmers applied to their profits. So obviously, when we look at the data this way, it becomes significant.
Sorry, Minister, I only have a few minutes, so I've kind of got your answer that you're not ready to make that decision yet, despite the numbers that we have seen. And I think for you to say it impacts their profits, there's no profits there when you're losing 12% of your revenue just on the carbon tax, and to say it's 1%, every data we have seen from that is not the case. And when you're including that, we've also heard from CN and CP that the carbon tax they are passing on to producers in 2022, and it's $50 a ton, is $28 million. That's just from transport. And I don't think your data is including that if you're just talking about grain drying. We're trying to heat barns. These are costs being passed on to producers that they cannot pass on anywhere else. So I want to question your data there in terms of 1% of revenue. I don't think any producer in Canada will say it's only 1% of their revenue when every number that we have is besides that. But I want to leave some time for my colleague. Well, let you ask your question. I don't think, did you stop in the clock when the point of order was going on?
Yeah, I did. We did. Yeah, we did. So
I'm still at 2 minutes left.
Yeah, you got 2 minutes
Okay,
and
go
15
ahead.
seconds.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. And thank you to Chris and Christine as well. Minister, we've seen reports going on right now of items, bare essentials coming off of grocery store shelves. And with the COVID-19 being so prevalent right now, and there's people are panicking about certain things. I'm just wondering, Minister, do you have a plan in place to ensure that our grocery store shelves can be kept full of fresh fruits and vegetables? Grocery stores are an essential service. We have places like the Ontario Food Terminal in Toronto, which provide about 95% of the fresh produce to the independent supermarkets in Ontario, as well as food distribution companies around the province. And a place like that employs over 2,000 people on a daily basis. Private stores also have distribution centers that have many employees in the same space at the same time. We've seen events being canceled in different places with many people there. Does the government have a plan to make sure that we don't create a panic and that the grocery store shelves are not empty during this COVID-19 virus?
I think you're right. We have, and we all have a responsibility as leaders to behave in a way to reassure Canadians that we have here in Canada, working in good collaboration with the provinces as well, all the resources to face the situation. We have good health system and, a good economy as well. I'm very confident that working together with the provinces, with the different industries that are being impacted in a way or another, we can. On peut se retrouver dans une situation où
we might find ourselves having to face a situation. So, should the coronavirus crisis hit Canada harder, there will be variations in both demand and supply, so it might become more difficult to find supplies with some suppliers. There might be a redistribution of what is being exported and what is grown domestically. But there's already a relationship between industry, the provinces, and the federal government. Our team is working on this. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. It's great to see you in the room. I want to start on advance payment programs. And so just to give you some context, Minister, we've had the conversation. Of course, this has been something that has been just debated and discussed in the House. Back on February 27th, we had the chance to learn more about the advance payment program. And essentially what they are is loans to provide cash flow for farmers that are facing difficult times. And we know that 2018 and 2019 has been challenging years. And what we learned, Minister, at the last meeting on February 27th is that our government had increased the limit for all farmers up to $1 million. I believe you might have referenced that in your speech. We had raised the interest-free portion on the loan from $100,000 to $500,000. We actually provided a stay of default, which is allowing farmers more time to be able to pay back these loans that have been provided, which are certainly important, particularly in Western Canada, where we've seen a lot of moisture and challenging times with grain drying. And then we also provided an additional 2 months for farmers to file their application. I just want to make sure, is that correct? Is that what's been done, certainly in 2018?
Yes, you're absolutely right. After the closure of the Chinese market for canola, mainly, this is when we have decided to increase the condition, allowing all farmers to get higher loan, and specifically for canola farmers to have a bigger amount of interest-free loans. And we are working through 34 different administrations who are administrating the system for us. You're right, in 2018, they have asked for a stay of default. So the payment that was due October 2019 has been postponed till April. And we are in regular contact with these administrators. And for the time being, they do not see any they don't expect any stay of default. Je ne sais pas comment utiliser le terme correctement.
I don't know how to say it properly in English.
APP administrators. And we learned about that last time in the committee, how there's 34. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the leader of the official opposition has asked the Prime Minister to obviously provide a stay of default, essentially, to the farmers. Some of the members of this committee have certainly done so and spoken up into the House and asked why you haven't been doing that. And what I asked the question last time in the committee was, I said, when can the minister actually choose to review a stay of default? And we learned that the actual APP administrator is required to submit and ask you to do so. I asked the officials last time, they weren't sure at the time, but I'll ask you, Minister, have you received a stay of default request from the APP administrator in any of the forms in Western Canada particularly?
No, we haven't.
No. Okay. Thank you. And assuming once you do receive something like that, you would review the application on its merits and make a decision. And obviously, given the fact that we've done this in the past, it very well could be likely that it would be extended moving forward. Is
Absolutely.
that correct? Great. I want to move us towards studying ways in which the Government of Canada can reduce GHG emissions for farmers. And Mr. Barlow has brought forward a motion that we're going to be able to have the chance to study how we can lower GHG emissions for farmers. But in my riding of King's Hants, one very important institution is the Kentville Research Station, Minister. And, part of our job is not only to work with private sector, it's also to make sure that government itself is greening. And I know my predecessor, Scott Bryson, was a part of that initiative under the Treasury Board. Can you speak to our work to green agriculture, particularly internally with some of our own operations?
You're right, and we have put in place different type of programs to support farmers to get to access new technologies and best practices as well. I was in Nova Scotia recently, and I was there to make an announcement for a greenhouse. Actually, I think I referred to it in my speech, to a greenhouse who's now 100% green energy. I think closer to your place, we have also supported a farm to allow them, or a center to allow them to get equipment tractors that are zero emission. So these are a good concrete example. We are also making significant investment in our research centers. We have 20 around Canada. Just to give you an example, in Lennoxville, in my riding, we have a research center working on dairy cows and porks, and they are working on how to feed the animals and generate less gas emissions. So these are interesting new ways, and it's also avoiding or diminishing the need for supplies.
That's great, Minister. I really appreciate that. And I look forward to working collaboratively in this committee in the days ahead to continue to support those efforts. I'm the youngest member of the governing party here in Ottawa. Minister, what are we doing to support young farmers? We know that's important in terms of being able to have the next generation. I think you probably have about 45 seconds, and I'll let you talk about what we're doing for young farmers, particularly people my age.
So through Farm Credit Canada, we have some special loans with the lower interest to help them. You can see in my mandate letter and the mandate letter of the Minister of Finance that we are working on fiscal measures to facilitate intergenerational transfers. And I'm also very proud to launch the first Youth Council, and we have received 825 applications for this council. I will be announcing the names very shortly.
Thank you very much, Minister. Really appreciate your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blois. Maintenant, Monsieur Perron pour jusqu'à 6 minutes.
Mr. Perron, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Bibeau. Thank you, Ms. Forbes, Ms. Walker. Mr. Forbes, Ms. Walker, thank you for being here with us. I'll try to keep my question simple. In the first vote, we are talking about compensation for dairy producers. I'm very happy to see that. You talked about the progress you were making. Is there some idea of the timetable? People are concerned, and the budget is going to be tabled soon. Yes, thank you. I learned my lesson, so I won't give you a date, but I can tell you that we have come forward. We've moved forward a great deal. We've been able to identify not only the financial impacts, but also the kind of mechanisms that each sector would like. Each sector made recommendations for financial mechanisms that were different. So I'm at the final discussion stage with Finance Canada and others. We are fully committed to providing full and equitable compensation for sectors under supply management. That's dairy, eggs, and poultry. So far, there has been no entry of poultry or eggs at the border. So we haven't felt the impact yet, but we want to give producers and processors the means they need to engage in the investment that will be necessary to help them adapt to the future. You're going to respect the demands made by individual industries. We understand that. I also understand why you won't give us a precise date. But since the agreements have been quantified, can we expect to see figures in the budget projections? This would be very reassuring to people in the sector. My second question. I understand the advanced payments issue It's very helpful to provide interest-free loans. But the committee has already begun the work of assessing the business risk management program. So should we, in some cases, not consider for sectors like canola and others that are having problems with China direct assistance? The U.S. has no problem massively subsidizing some of its sectors. Could we consider doing something similar? It can always be considered. Risk management programs are designed to ensure the long-term sustainability of the industry so that farms in various agricultural sectors, production operations, have the programs they need to face difficult times. It's impact-based. Sometimes the impact may seem to be greater, but when we look at the actual numbers, when we do the costing, it's not the way it necessarily looks. What we're trying to do is ensure long-term sustainability and make it possible for farmers to get through a difficult year and manage their operations and cope with unpredictable risk. Apologies for interrupting. I'm starting to understand how committees work. I'm not necessarily talking about the system in general, but of an emergency fund in case of need. You've been talking about support measures for the energy transition. That's fine. But, farmers in my riding had no yield, had no crops. When they experienced flooding, there were years in which they had no crops at all, no yields at all. So, could the committee make recommendations on what to do in such cases? There are programs like Agri-Investment where producers can get up to $10,000 each year. What about direct assistance? Are you considering that? Assistance is impact-based. We make those decisions on the basis of data. So depending on the programs in question, we need to take the time to see what the business figures, the sales figures of the organizations are. We need to work with producers' associations, farmers' associations, because they provide the figures. In the meat sector, they had a very difficult 4 months, but they had a very good spring. Then 4 tough months. At the end of the year, what we look at with industry representatives is whether they will in fact, be able to make it through the year. There are programs that are delivered through the province, and in such cases, it would be up to the province to put in an application. Please forgive me for interrupting, but there's an important question I wanted to ask. You talked about ratifying NAFTA, the new NAFTA, as quickly as possible. There are import quotas in the agreement. There are other quotas, and I hope that everything will be in place by August the 1st. We will go through the parliamentary process for the agreement. Thank you, Mr. Perron. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome back to the committee, Minister. I was just reading from the Prime Minister's mandate letter, bullet point number 2, where you are to work with the Minister of Finance and farmers on tax measures to facilitate the intergenerational transfer of farms. You may recall, Minister, in the 42nd Parliament, former MP Guy Caron had Bill C-274, which proposed to do precisely that, yet most of the Liberal caucus voted against the bill and defeated it. So why the sudden change of heart and you're now supporting this proposal?
Well, I think this is something, generally, we want to support farmers, and there's definitely a need for young farmers to be supported. The price of the land and the price of the value of the farms have increased so much during the last generation. Mm-hmm. We understand it's hard for them to buy the farm. Mm-hmm. We are definitely at this point. As you know, sometimes there are different ways to present bills and to include it differently. Now we have taken the time to consult last year, and we are committed to proceed with improvements to facilitate intergenerational transfer.
Sure, I understand that, but I mean, you voted the bill down before I even had a chance to go to committee where we could have studied this and made some amendments. I mean, I'm glad to see that you're working on it, but we did have an opportunity in the previous parliament. I wanted to also just talk about business risk management. I'm very grateful to my colleagues in the committee for agreeing to study that first and foremost. And I can assure you, Minister, that the recommendations that we have in our report are going to closely follow the witness testimony that we're receiving. We've got a very wide range of witnesses, and I certainly hope that those recommendations are taken quite seriously by you. We want to get them done in advance of your meeting in July. There is concern, though, that if your government is to come about and agree to some changes in the business risk management programs, there's concern over the delay of their implementation. So what kind of measures are you taking to ensure that the fixes to the program are going to be instituted in a timely manner?
This is a very high priority, not only in my mandate letter, but for me personally. And I've really tried since our first FPT meeting last July to put this on the fast track. We have met in December. Normally, we only meet once a year. We will be meeting on the telephone or video conference, whatever, electronically in April. And then the objective is to have concrete improvements by July. This is an ambitious agenda because these business risk managements are mainly cost shared with the provinces. All the provinces are not at the same, don't have all the same positions, so we'll have to get to a consensus. But
sounds like an argument for a leadership role by the federal government.
And this is what I'm doing. I'm working very hard on that, I can assure you. I'm trying to think out of the box, to be creative. So, and I really thank you for taking this, having chosen this subject, because the timing is just perfect. I really look forward for your recommendation. Think out of the box, be creative.
On agri-stability, the feedback has been resoundingly negative, so it very much does need to fix. I mean, I think one farmer told me that agri-stability suits his accountant better than it does him, so we obviously do need to change it. On the subject of risk and managing it, I mean, the landscape that farmers are facing these days with international trade, with the threats from climate change, the high costs. I mean, we know that farm incomes, the amount of money that farmers are left with after they've paid all of their suppliers is very little. Farm debt has doubled over the last 20 years. So we have to address this. But now, of course, we have the coronavirus. You made mention of it in your opening statement that you're watching. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what specifically the department is doing if this virus has the potential to significantly disrupt supply networks that are already under strain from previous issues?
Well, we are having these discussions with the different representatives of the different sectors to see how we can eventually support. I think it's also a matter of the private sector to get together with the retailers and the suppliers and reconsidering the commercial, la ligne commerciale,
the commercial line
relationship. So where we are as a federal government is, as I said earlier, in response to Mr. Perron, is we're there to support the businesses when they face a hard year, and I know that this year it's particularly challenging. And we are moving with them to support them depending on the situation that we're going to face.
Okay, and I think just in my final seconds, just like a comment echoing what Monsieur Perron said about the threshold limits in CUSMA for certain dairy products that are exported. We have heard resoundingly time and time again, with respect to the dairy year starting on August 1st, they really want to see ratification of CUSMA happen with that in mind, and I hope you're very much paying attention to that.
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. And now we'll move, on va y aller dans la ronde de 5.
We'll move to the 5-minute round. Please go ahead. Hello, Minister. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to your officials. My first question is on supply management. The whole issue of quotas. Minister, would you be in favor of having those quotas be as close to the farm as possible? If yes, it might be important for you to tell your colleague, the Minister of International Trade. That is one of the first questions I have. So perhaps a quick answer. Yes, there have been consultations. Leadership is, of course, for the Minister of International Trade to exercise. I can understand that these would be granted, the quotas would be granted to producers rather than distributors. Within the restrictions in our trade agreements, you can rest assured that I and the entire team is cooperating with the Department of International Trade, and we want to keep those quotas as close to the farm as possible. We need to be close to the land, Minister, and I hope you can convey that message. Thank you. Now, compensation. You talked about compensation. You've discussed the issue with farmers groups, with producer groups, with poultry producers, but we have no date for these. And as you know, there's a great deal of concern. Even though none of the product has crossed the border yet, we know our neighbors, and they could get on with it very quickly. They could get moving very quickly, and that's the concern of our producers. I do hear you, but all I can do is reiterate that we are fully and unequivocally committed to compensation. I have heard the industry's demands. It's taking a bit longer than I expected. I concede that, but our commitment is as firm as it ever was. Thank you, Minister. I would also like to ask you about the new agreement. COSMA is at third reading and should be implemented fairly quickly. There have been some significant violations, particularly with regard to sovereignty, the restrictions on our export capacity, for example. So I would like to hear you on that. This is the first time that in our negotiations with other countries we're faced with restrictions of that kind. We are working with the Canadian Dairy Commission, with the industry. A committee has been struck to work on the dairy sector's vision for the future. The goal is to formulate a vision, see it through an innovation lens, develop new markets and perhaps new products, which will not be necessarily targeted in CUSMA. There again, we do want to protect supply management. I hope there's no doubt in your mind on that when I say we need to be creative. We will be maintaining the supply management system. But I do think that the dairy sector and milk protein, for example, byproducts, non-fat solids, I think there's a great deal of innovation that can be done, innovative research, and I think there's a future there. The future may be unknown, but it's promising. There are nonetheless, Minister, many concerns among the industry. It's all very well to develop new markets, but when we need to ask the U.S. for authorization before we can break into new markets, that does significantly complicate the possibilities ahead. There's no real change. It's just worded differently or labeled differently. In real life, the U.S. always had the possibility of withdrawing from the agreement. The way it's worded is different. It is a matter of concern, Minister. Withdrawing is one thing. Obliging your neighbor to consult you before your neighbor can enter a new market is something else again. The wording is very easy to understand, at least for me and for farmers and producers across Canada. Mr. Drouin, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for appearing here today, Minister, and our thanks to the Deputy Minister and the Assistant Deputy Minister. My colleague was asking questions on compensation. In 2013, the preceding government made concessions and announced to the world, in fact, that Canada was ready to make concessions. There was no agreement with dairy producers. In 2015, during the elections, an agreement had been announced less than 10 days from the election, without any consultations with the agricultural community. Minister Macaulay came into the portfolio. There were $350 million announced in assistance for processors and $250 million for non-dairy producers. Once the portfolio became yours, you promised a working group so that we could meet the demands of our dairy producers. What is that agreement? We know that funding has been announced. Where are we at with that funding? And what about the PTPCP? 2 working groups have been formed, one on impact analysis. It was looking at the impacts of all 3 agreements, CETA, PTPCP, and COSMA. So we made the announcement last summer that there would be $375 million for PTPCP and CETA, the agreement with Europe. Let's just call it CETA in every language. And as you said, there was already $350 million committed, $350 for producers, $100 for processors. And the third component, the one I was mentioning to Mr. Leroux, is for the future of the sector. Poultry and eggs are going to be studied as well. The analysis for poultry and eggs has been made for all 3 agreements. The working group formulated a series of recommendations. It has indicated what kinds of mechanisms it would like to see. I have taken note of their advice. And I believe the next stage is to move ahead with compensation for poultry and eggs, and then complete the compensation under COSMA for dairy and poultry and eggs. So, Minister, if I understand correctly, the working groups have been formed for analysis of impacts of those agreements. But once COSMA is in place, we could discuss the issue again. Most of the work has already been done. A few moments ago, we spoke briefly about TRQs. When we consulted the industry in recent years, we expected European cheeses to be fine cheeses, but we ended up with a lot of cheddar. The Minister of International Trade committed to comprehensive consultations for all TRQs, for all import tariffs. You have told the committee that you're in favor of ensuring that TRQs are again as close to the farm as possible. Yes, the first consultation phase is drawing to an end. There will be some options made public for a second phase of consultations. We are narrowing it to a second round. It'll be published in the Gazette, the Canada Gazette, very soon. And then we'll be able to move to phase 2 of the consultations. The agricultural sector, as we know it, provided some excellent input. You know that we'll be reviewing the business risk management program. Could you tell us something about what works and what doesn't, and what our limits are? I know that the federal government provides 60% of the support funding, and the provinces provide 40%. I imagine that the provinces would have to support the changes.
To our committee, a former colleague on Fisheries and Ocean, and we welcome you here on the Ag Committee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, do you or your department know what contribution family farm income is supplemented by off-farm income?
Je suis pas sûre que j'ai bien compris votre question.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not sure I understood your question.
For example, in the riding that I represent, many of the family farms have people working off that farm to supplement family farm income. Is the Department of Agriculture aware of what the influence is for off-farm income in keeping family farms viable?
I could have chosen to listen to the translation, but I think my English is good enough to try to understand your English. So.
Okay.
Mais je vais continuer en français. Alors oui, je suis très consciente.
But I will continue in French. I'm well aware that many family farms, like many small businesses, need additional income if they are to make ends meet. So was I aware of that? Yes, I am aware of that.
Hope that you would be aware of that the next time you're discussing things like energy projects at the cabinet table, because many of the farmers in my area, the running joke is we work in the oil and gas sector to support our farming habit. And we say that lightly, but these days it's not taken lightly. I would hope that you would keep that in mind the next time you're making deliberations about energy projects in Western Canada. Now I'd like to move on to talking about net farm income. Over the last number of years, depending on what trading arrangement we have, we've lost about 45% or $5.6 billion in revenue from various countries like China, India, Italy, Peru, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, with our trade with the embargoes that we have or the tariffs that we have with these countries. We have a carbon tax that's putting anywhere from a pressure of 8 upwards, escalating 12 to 15%, depending on who you listen to, on farm income. And in your party's platform, you committed to putting $5 billion into Farm Credit Corporation. Is it because of the mishandling of the trade relations and other mishandling of the agricultural file that you believe that the fiscal solvency of farms in Canada is going to become a liability for our major financial institutions, that now you need $5 billion to prop up Farm Credit Corporation, to prop up the farms that are no longer making a profit because of government failed policy?
Alors, vous vous souvenez qu'on a fait une grande...
If you remember, we conducted an economic analysis in 2016-17, and the Barton Report, as we call it, identified the agri-food sector as being a priority for economic growth in Canada. That is why we are investing. We are opening the possibilities for assistance to help farms by means of more green investment projects, investments that will enable growth, help develop the value chain. And we believe that Agriculture Canada funding knows the sector well and can support it in a variety of ways, give it additional resources, make sure that the financial services provided to farmers across Canada through a range of organizations are brought together within a single organization. We believe that would be more efficient and more supportive of the agricultural sector.
Labor shortage for the beef processing sector.
Alors, il y a, entre autres, des programmes de travailleurs étrangers.
Among other things, we do have a foreign workers program. As you know, a few months ago, we announced a new pilot project, which will come into effect soon. The new project will make it possible for foreign workers who have the skills needed and have a full-time job offer in a agri-food processing company can be fast-tracked to permanent residency status. That is a very tangible example, a very practical example of a way in which we're trying to help the processing sector find more workers.
Knows about the transmissibility of COVID-19 between humans and animals, particularly animals in the agricultural business?
À ma connaissance, il n'y a pas de preuves scientifiques.
To my knowledge, there is no scientific evidence that the disease can be passed either from animals to humans or from humans to animals.
Can you give us an update on when you expect trade access to be regained with China, India, Italy, Peru, Saudi Arabia, and Vietnam?
Thank you very much, Mr. Calkin. Now, Mr. Blois for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be splitting my time with my colleague, Ms. Bissett, as well. Minister, in my riding in King's Hants, when I would get on the doorsteps in the lead up to the election, people talked about the importance of local food and trying to find ways to support local producers in that sense. We introduced I shouldn't say we, it was before my time in this chamber, but we introduced a food policy in the last Parliament. Can you provide some information on what that program has entailed so I can certainly go back to my constituents in King's Hants and let them know about some of the programs that are available?
Avec plaisir. Donc, c'est un élément dont je suis très fière.
With pleasure. This is something I'm very proud of. I had the pleasure of conceiving and delivering the International Feminist Policy. And it is my colleague, Minister Macaulay, who conceived of the agriculture policy, even though I ended up delivering it. It involves $134 million. That is the investment in the local food infrastructure fund. There is a first call for proposals out. In fact, it went out last summer. 50 million are already available. People were informed in recent weeks. Those promoters who were the first proponents of a series of successful projects. The point is for Canadians to have access to quality food and to make sure that our food system develops in a way that is both environmentally sound and economically sound.
Important element of the food policy. There's a component around food fraud. And when we talk about food fraud, it's, for example, we think about honey. Donc, we have made an investigation, and the Canadian honey is 100% honey, but we have seen some imports. So it's putting more resources to make sure that we Canadians buy what they think they buy. There will be an initiative around Buy Canadian. The idea is to strengthen the trust and the pride of Canadians looking at Canadian agriculture. There's a fund for Nordic and isolated communities, food waste, and school food program.
Thank you, Minister. That was great. You are the first Canadian female agriculture minister in the history of this country, which I think is impressive. I know I'm just going to name a couple farmers that might be watching at home: Veronica Smith, Katie Ketty, Elena Bent, Gina Luckett. When I talked to them, they were so excited about the fact of having a female in your position. They're the next generation, and I know that you mentioned the feminist policy within agriculture. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we're inspiring women in agriculture?
Thank you. I think I did not realize that it would be so important before I enter into politics, and now I know that I have so many young women coming to me and saying that they are inspired and they are glad that this is one more glass ceiling that has been broken. And I think now I have the responsibility to make sure that we have more women around the table and young women. So, developing their leadership, engaging in their communities, and having this conversation with those I call experienced men to make sure that we make some space around the decisions table for them. This is why I've created the Youth Council as well, to help as many of them build their leadership and have the courage and to raise their hands and run for politics, or to be to represent their sector and their region.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to pass the rest of my time over to my colleague, Ms. Bissett.
Madame Bibeau, merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. C'est un plaisir.
Ms. Bibeau, thank you for being here with us this afternoon. I had a brief question. In my region, there are a lot of small farms, and I know that you did mention them quickly. But are there any tangible measures being taken to help small organic farms? There's a broad range of programs that exist. This gives me an opportunity to talk about the Canadian Partnership for Agriculture. As the name indicates, it's a partnership that includes the provinces. There is significant funding that is transferred to the provinces. I don't want to mislead you, $3 billion over 5 years. Of that, on top of that, there are $2 billion that will be administered by the provinces. 60% of that is federal money, 40% is provincial money. Quite often, the money is disbursed through programs delivered through the provinces, and that is where many small farms can get their funding. This can also help them reach markets and be more environmentally sound. There's a risk management component, and that is how we can reach the smaller organizations. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I just want to be sure the time is distributed properly. Thank you. Right. Thank you. Earlier, and I'll come back to the main topic of the day, the supplementary estimates. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has received additional funding. You were talking about inspections for honey, for example. Are some of these funds going to be earmarked for customs? People in the sector have said that customs control at the border can be lacking because customs officers don't have the training they need to identify products coming into Canada. I have great confidence in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency staff and in CBSA staff as well. It's a question of allocating resources. Through the food policy, some $24 million are allocated to detecting food fraud. And in fact, that's the goal. We want to put more money into checking what's coming over the border. About a year ago, there was a program called Safe Food for Canadians. In fact, yes, Safe Food came into force. That program gives us another way of checking what we bring in and making sure that it is in compliance with the same rules that we impose on our own producers. I'll talk about the next generation for a moment, the succession in agriculture. The Union of Agricultural Producers has asked for an exemption, has asked that new farmers be exempted during the first 5 years. What do you think of that? I'm still in consultation mode, as it were. I'm sure I can count on the committee to study the issue. I'm certainly very interested in finding ways of helping the next generation more effectively. I don't want to say that this way would be the best way, but certainly the principle looks wonderful. A quick word on mental health, because it is in the document. Can we consider increasing the funding to help Quebec and the provinces with their innovative programs to support workers with mental health services? We've already committed $5 billion.
Minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing us to get through 2 full rounds of questions. That's great. Minister, I wanted to talk to you. There was a report released by Humane Society International, and over the last 5 years, the period from 2015 to 2019, 740,000 animals died in barn fires. So not only is that a brutal loss of life, but to a farmer it can be absolutely devastating, not only to lose the barn, but the horrible way in which the livestock died. I'm wondering if you can inform the committee, are you speaking to Minister Baines about revisions in the National Building Code, about maybe putting in additional fire suppression tools into the building code so that when these devastating barn fires happen, there is a better opportunity to snuff them out before such a horrible loss of life?
No, I haven't had conversation on this subject.
Can you say why not? I mean, that's a pretty devastating fact.
Yes, I agree with you, but no, I haven't had such a conversation you were asking for.
Well, like, are you planning to?
have.
Like, is that something that you?
This is something that you are bringing to my attention, and I'm happy to look more into it.
Okay, that's good. So maybe I'll follow up with you,
Yes,
Minister
sure.
Baines, at a later date.
Yes.
Okay. I think that was pretty much the only question I had. I think, I think everyone's covered everything else, so I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor, and that will conclude the first round. So je remercie Madame la Ministre d'être venue ici.
I'd like to thank the Minister for coming here this afternoon. There are a great many challenges in agriculture, of course, but many opportunities because we all have to eat. Thanks again, and until next time. We'll suspend.
When it's 3 times, that means you got usually it's 2. So 3 knocks. That's yeah.
Means the White Walkers are coming.
White Walkers. Okay, so again, we'll our second half of today's meeting. We have with us again Mr. Chris Forbes, Deputy Minister, and also Ms. Christine Walker, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Management Branch. Do we have anybody else? No. Okay, so I guess we'll go right into the question rounds. And to start us off is Ms. Leanne Rood. Are you okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Coming. Thank you, Chris and Christine, once again for being here today. I just want to talk a little bit about the departmental plan. In the 2018-2019 AAFC departmental results report on page 13, I'm not sure if you have that there or not to reference at all. Well, on page 13, you're using an average annual growth rate between 2017 and 2025 to calculate the percentage change in the economic performance of the agriculture and agri-food sector, as well as the percentage change in agri-food products sold. Now, the same criteria were used in the 2019-2020 departmental plan on page 10 of that same report. However, in the 2020-2021 departmental plan report, which was just released, you've changed the criteria on both categories. So specifically, you're now using a compound annual growth rate rather than the average annual growth rate to calculate the targets between 2017 and 2025. Furthermore, this change to using compound annual growth rate changed the actual results for the previous years. So not only that, but to calculate percentage change in economic performance of the agriculture and agri-food sector, you've now gone back to 2007 as the beginning year rather than 2017. And to calculate the percentage change in agri-food products, you've gone back to 2012 as the beginning rather than 2017. So just wondering if you know what the reason was for changing the department's calculations from using average annual growth round to compound annual growth rate.
Sure. I mean, on the basic answer on that is that those should be kind of synonyms. Basically, that it may have been just a clarification in language that when we call it a compound annual growth rate, when we calculated an average before, it should have been the compound annual growth rate. But
it was calculated differently, though, and when you look at it, the numbers are completely different. So why would the average annual growth rates be for the percentage change in the economic performance of the agriculture and ag-food sector be different in 2018 and 2019?
So a couple of things, and to be fair, I'm not looking at the numbers, so I apologize for that. The changes in the numbers could have come about from a couple of reasons. One could be historical revisions to data, like new data that becomes available. Sometimes Statistics Canada will revise back a couple of years. To be quite honest with you, I'm not sure I can answer the question around the start date, but that may have just been about better availability of data. Happy to come back, if there's more information you'd like on the specifics of the calculation, but just to say overall that the average that we were calculating before should have been a compound annual growth rate as well, because that's sort of the way we would try to calculate it. So must be some, I would think, some data change in there, like some historical revisions that might have driven some of that.
So, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I actually have a list of questions that relate to this, and since they don't have the report in front of them, I'm wondering if I can submit these questions to you and ask that you table the answers back so that maybe we could get the answers for those questions. Would that be okay?
Fine for us. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've heard from a lot of cattle producers here in Ontario recently that we obviously have a shortage with processing capacity in Ontario with the closing of the Riding Regency plant. That's about 10% of the processing capacity here in Ontario for beef farmers. We add on carbon tax and new transportation regulations in animal transport in the sector here. And I know that the cattlemen have come to you with a proposal on something that the government can do to help them going through this crisis. So I'm just wondering if if the department's received that proposal and if there is a plan going forward on to help them and to implement some of these requests or suggestions that they've made to you.
Certainly. I mean, first of all, it has been obviously a really difficult period in Ontario in particular for with the lack of processing capacity. So we understand that, and we're working pretty closely with the government of Ontario and the industry in Ontario and the cattlemen, more widely the Cattlemen's Association nationally, to look at solutions both for farmers or producers and for the where we can find processing capacity. It's a difficult situation, obviously, but one that we're certainly working. I think, as the minister said in the previous session, we're always open to working with the sector to hear their ideas and see if there's ways that we can work together to kind of deliver on what they need.
Okay. And perhaps I'll ask too, I asked this of the minister, but when it comes to our food security and our food supply now with the coronavirus happening and we don't want to see a pandemic or a panic, I should say, of folks at the grocery stores wondering how they're going to get groceries in their stores if places shut, the distribution centers shut down. So is there a plan in the works that will, in the department and the government to ensure that we have our food security in place, and perhaps in deeming the food supply and our security as an essential service going forward through here?
So certainly what I'd say is that we work, basically on a daily basis with colleagues across the government, most notably, and maybe to your question, in departments like Transport Canada, to help identify where we might be seeing emerging impacts. And this actually, we do this in any time there are kind of economic challenges, and this one's obviously kind of emerging and developing, day by day in terms of the impacts. And so I think one of the things we've learned is that a lot of these things can be quite regional and local in nature, indeed, some of the pressure points. And so part of it is having good intelligence, across the country in terms of where we're seeing pressure points and trying to figure out kind of sometimes specific local or regional solutions to some of the barriers we're seeing, whether it's around, getting supplies from, processors to retail shelves, or whether it's from getting it from farms to processors, or whether it's getting inputs. So it will depend a little bit on the situation, but we certainly will keep in pretty close contact with.
Of course, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Rood.
Thank you, Mr.
Now,
Chair.
Mr. Lewis, for up to 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Forbes, Ms. Walker, for your time and your thoroughness. I've been taking notes the whole time, and a lot of things have been covered, but it's wonderful if we can expand on it, because it never seems to be enough time to talk about all the things we wanted to. Specifically, I wanted to start by talking about youth and our next generation of farmers, both at home in Kitchener-Conestoga and on the Hill. These young farmers come to us and they speak, and it's amazing to hear the ideas they have, the open-mindedness and their concern for environment and wanting to take over their farms. So I'm wondering if you can tell us some specific programs that can help our next generation of farmers. And
I mean, we have a range. I mean, I try to be quick. I think the minister raised, through the agricultural partnership that often, the provinces are delivering a bit of programming that's often quite targeted at local, and regional needs in a specific province, which I think can be sometimes quite helpful for young farmers. We ourselves, maybe a couple of things to point out. We do, the minister pointed out having a youth council that she will launch, I think, as a way to hear specifically about the priorities of young farmers. And then there is programming, often kind of financially driven through the Farm Credit Canada or our own programming, the Agricultural Loans Act, which often provides, some financial relief to new farmers or those just starting up.
Ms. Walker, would you like to comment, or is it?
In addition, the department received funding to invest in young people through internships and also to help them get into the agricultural job market.
Yeah.
Okay, in my notes I had talked about intergenerational transfers as well, which is again something that's going to help our next generation. That's some of the specific programs that you're mentioning.
So that's about the tax and other measures that might be specific to the reducing the financial barriers around intergenerational transfer of farms, and that's something that the minister referenced that she's working on with the Minister of Finance.
Okay, all right, that helps. And I was going to say the Youth Council hasn't been formed yet. That's in its infancy.
That's to come.
So,
yes.
okay, I'm curious to hear more, because even locally we're hearing people say they wanted to start sort of local chapters.
Yeah.
So.
And just to say, I think as the minister pointed out, there were about 825 applicants for that Youth Council. And I think that one of the things for the department, I mean, we'll use, obviously the council won't be 825 people, but we'll use those applicants to the extent they're interested as a resource for us across the country, right, to sort of build a bit of a pool of young farmers, students that we can sort of tap into for discussion issues, or if they're interested in aspects of our work. So
yeah, that's a good point. Like if hopefully just considered all the universities and the young students.
Well, they've identified themselves as interested, so we should take advantage of that.
Perfect. Okay. I also have many more women in our region that are farming and just across Canada getting involved. So are there any, maybe say, some unique challenges or programs that would help them kind of grow their businesses as well?
So we certainly are, through our programming, we do have a program, Agri-Diversity, under the Agricultural Partnership, which is kind of targeted to expand diversity in the agricultural sector more broadly. That, again, is, we work with the provinces and the sector on that. I'd go back to some of the other comments I made about, provincial programming under the Agricultural Partnership can kind of tackle specific local and provincial needs in that regard.
I don't want to shut you out of the conversation. Well, and then one of the common themes that I see both from our younger farmers and also from the women that I talk to are wanting to get into more organic farming. Is any specific programs that I can kind of or you want to expand on?
I mean, a few things there. We do the broad sort of financial and other programs that are out there. I mean, we do support the organic sector through, for example, our agri-science clusters. We have an organic research agenda there that we support the sector in. We've worked certainly with the sector in terms of supporting renewal and strengthening of organic standards for Canada, which obviously important for the sector for building its brand. So there's that kind of work that we do, both on the kind of the research side and setting the frame, setting the frame for the sector, the standards for the sector.
Okay. Ms. Walker? No? Well, I just don't want to shut you out of the conversation. And ultimately then there's a lot of environmental concerns, especially with the younger farmers that I'm talking to. They're very open to new technologies. They're very open to, kind of being environmentally conscious. But there's a bit of a barrier to entry already as far as price is concerned, and they want to make sure they do things properly. Are there specific programs that would not necessarily help youth, but just environmental programs that would help farming itself making transitions?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of interesting programming there. I mean, we have the Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Program, which is looking at researching kind of innovative approaches to reducing greenhouse gases. We do funding, again, through provincial programming. We've just, over the last year, launched something called the Living Labs initiative with our researchers. A couple of sites so far across Canada where we're actually working with, it's kind of farmer-driven, if you will, and our scientists, instead of having the scientists come in and start telling you here's the solution to your problem, it's actually the farmer identifying some of the challenges they may have on a range of environmental and other issues, and then the scientists and others kind of building a bit of a research agenda around how we might most efficiently. So it takes a kind of cost-effective approach into looking at solutions to some of the challenges that a farmer might face.
You,
and so that's an interesting new program.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And now, Monsieur Perron pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Perron, 6 minutes. Thank you for spending these additional moments with us. We're reviewing corporate risk management programs. Provinces will need to be on board because the programs are often split 60-40. How do you stop asymmetric programs from penalizing some sectors? The reforms might be less aggressive than what we need in Quebec, for example, because some provinces which have less money will not be as keen. How can you prevent some sectors from being penalized? Do you mean sectors or regions? No, I mean regions, you're right. Well, we'll try to keep a consistent approach. Working with the provinces, we work very closely together, I think, in quite a unique fashion. We have established a series of programs that are effective and that work for the sector across the country. As the minister said, we are never entirely closed to new ideas. So if there are good suggestions, we certainly look at them to see how useful they might be. I'll come back to what my Conservative colleagues were saying about the action plan on COVID-19. It touches on what I was asking the minister, something about an emergency fund that could flow quickly. We hear from people on the ground that programs, of which there is a plethora, are extremely constraining. There is a huge amount of paperwork and red tape, and people are often discouraged. They don't apply for what they could be applying for. This year in particular, the strike that hit grain producers, it's not just a matter of helping them in a difficult year. The crisis came from outside. The diplomatic crisis with China, canola producers, pork producers, flooding in 2017 and 19, and probably this year in the coming weeks. We hope they won't come, but we'll have floods, coronavirus. Could we not envisage a fund that could provide direct assistance quickly? The countries with which we're competing internationally do have funds that way. And yet we're asking our producers to perform as well. We already have 2 forms of assistance in the risk management program. There's agri-investment, which is a savings account for which the government matches what the producer saves. And I think the average producer in Canada, well, this is something else. Yes, but it's up to the producer to decide. No, people would already need to have been saving for years. I'm not saying it's not a good program, but I think increasingly we're going to see situations where they'll have to be quick support provided to farmers. The other program is agri-revitalization, which will help areas where there have been, let's say, flooding, for example, at the request of the province. And that is a program from which funds could flow quickly to help farmers. Thank you. I'd like to talk about resources at customs. We've mentioned inspections and customs. Ms. Bibeau said there would be more funding. What we're hearing from people on the ground is that there's a huge gap at the border, and it'll take resources to fix it. How much of the $345 million is going to be invested in that? Can you give us an order of magnitude? Can you give us an amount? Our department doesn't deal with the borders. There's the Canadian Border Services Agency and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Both of them have the money to undertake inspections. I know it's not the same department, and maybe I haven't been expressing myself clearly, but I think you'd have a role to play in training for customs officers so that they can learn how to distinguish between one kind of chicken and another. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'm so sorry. I thought I had 6 minutes. No, you're right. You do have 6 minutes. Please, go ahead. Please go ahead. I don't want to spend more time on that. The Canadian Partnership for Agriculture, the increased funding for that, what is it going to be invested in? What we have, for the most part, are amounts carried over from the preceding year, which could be transferred, provincial programs where the money wasn't sent and has been spent and carried over to 2019. So there's additional funding from that. Thank you, Mr. Perron.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Forbes, Ms. Walker, thanks for coming before the committee. I was just wanting to refer to the minister's mandate letter again, and one of the other asks is that the Prime Minister wants the minister to lead a consolidation of existing federal financial and advisory services, which I guess are scattered across several agencies, and the new entity is going to be called Farm and Food Development Canada. Can you tell me which agencies you're looking to consolidate and where we're at with the new entity? Like, I guess it will require a legislative change.
So I think we're still in the stage, quite honestly, of scoping out what that could include. I think, if that be fair, I think that the advisory services and that kind of work, when you think about it, does come to organizations like Business Development Canada. I think obviously the regional development agencies also are sometimes involved in the food processing sector in particular. So I think we have to, we're going through kind of, I'd say, call it a bit of a scoping phase to look at, what are the range of issues that might be on the table, what are some of the challenges about doing that, and trying to figure out kind of what would be the way forward.
What I'm just curious, what provided the impetus for this to begin in the first place? Are you looking for more efficiency, or were you getting feedback from people who use the financial services and they just thought it might be better to have it under one umbrella?
I mean, I can't speak to the impetus because obviously it came from the Prime Minister to the Minister, but I guess what I would say is I understand the kind of context, I think, would be around, how do we help and better align our efforts to help the sector grow. I mean, I think it would be maybe my simplest way of putting it.
Okay, thank you. Also, the minister is tasked with supporting the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade in identifying additional tools to help Canada's agricultural and agri-food businesses export their products and diversify into global markets. Can you maybe talk about some of those additional tools, what's being considered?
Well, I think the tools, we have existing tools, obviously, through our own programming, through the Trade Commissioner Service. So I think we're looking at some of the challenges we face and, are there aspects of those existing tools or other things that we can bring to the table that might help? But at this stage, again, probably too early to comment in any detail.
And I guess brought on by, China having closed off its border and,
Well, you would think that, maybe more broadly, obviously, as an export-oriented sector, the agriculture and agri-food sector, very export-oriented, very diverse markets across the world, which I think is a lot of benefits, lots of opportunities, but obviously brings some challenges too in terms of working with other countries and importers in other countries and developing markets in those countries, and then dealing with challenges as they arise. So I think a range of reasons that you might want to look at this for sure.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the food policy because we are a country that produces far more food than our population can ever use, but we still have so many communities which are food insecure. Can you elaborate a little bit more on some of the details on how we are linking those food insecure communities throughout Canada with our producers and establishing those much needed food hubs and so on?
So I think the main point would be the local food infrastructure fund that the minister mentioned, which $50 million. And so I think there's aspects of that in terms of kind of creating a bit more, capacity in communities to, in many cases, just ensure, that whether it's local or food from elsewhere, but food is there that can be accessed by food insecure groups. I would say that there's a specific northern program run through the Northern Development Agency that kind of does the same in the north. And maybe I don't want to talk too long, but I just say I think we also are working through our research centers on some work in terms of vertical agriculture, like how can you grow products in northern climates in containers and that kind of work, and trying to figure out using technology to tackle some of the food security issues that might be might exist in kind of remote communities. And so a range of programs and activities going on.
And lastly, just on the ask for the exemption from the carbon tax on the fuels like natural gas and propane, in British Columbia, I'm thinking of marked diesel. There's a model that already exists. I'm trying to remember what the minister said on that, but if you can maybe just update me on where we're at with that, because I'm also wondering, are there ways that we can also identify maybe how we can, support farmers and recognize their carbon sequestration efforts? Like, is the department looking at any policy tools that can give credit to farmers and the carbon sequestration that they're doing? I'm just trying to find a way of getting out of the carbon tax debate and actually recognizing some of the positive work that farmers are already doing.
My simple answer to the question would be yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a interest, and I think we need more generally to think about how we can, I think, as you point out, recognize all the good environmental stewardship that producers undertake, right? That they obviously have a vested interest in the sustainability of our lands and waters. So we are working both on the research side, but also we will look at other tools as available.
Okay, Mr. McGregor. Now with the 5-minute round, Mr. Barlow, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mr. Forbes and Ms. Walker, for sticking around. The minister did comment in her presentation that there has been data collected to make the business case for the carbon tax. 2 quick questions on that. Does the data collected include outside of the direct carbon tax costs to farmers, like what they see on their energy bill? As I mentioned, CN and CP have released some numbers that right now they're transferring $17 million in carbon tax onto farmers, and in a couple of years it'll be $28 million. Significant costs, cattle liners, guys hauling fuel. Those are all passed on to agriculture. Are those numbers included in that data, and can you table that data that the minister is talking about making the business case?
So we'll maybe try to answer this kind of quickly and efficiently. So, but tell me if I get it wrong. I mean, so we do have data on impact, on fuel usage, on energy usage on farm from Statistics Canada, which we've used as a way of kind of modeling impacts, and we could go into all the challenges of the imprecisions of that. Certainly, indirect pass-ons would be an area that would be hard, quite honestly, to get in an accurate way, just because it's not it's static data that you're trying to model over time. The data that we've received that the minister spoke to recently from the governments and producer groups in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, sort of December through to February. I don't think some of those costs that kind of cost would be captured in there, and quite honestly, how you look at modeling that, I think that's a difficult one for me to tackle right here. But I think I can share with you, what we have.
Yeah, and I guess my argument would be that I think those numbers are important to try and calculate. I know it's not easy, but when you are passing on substantial costs onto an industry, I think the business case is there to ensure that you have the most accurate numbers you possibly can, especially if you are quote unquote giving a rebate which doesn't come close to actually meeting their costs. You can't say that the carbon tax is revenue neutral. And I think I want to make sure if the government is making that argument that they're close. And what we've heard from agriculture is the rebate's actually closer to 10% of their actual carbon tax costs. So, and I won't belabor that, but if you do have a business case that the minister was talking about, I'd like to see that submitted to the committee. Just to move on really quickly, my colleague, Mr. Calkins, mentioned it, and we've seen some substantial loss in trade markets, from canola, soybeans, and wheat. That is now, since 2015, depending on the commodity, it's a loss of revenue of $5.6 billion for Canadian agriculture. And I know, Mr. Forbes, you and I have been on a couple of trips before, but there hasn't been a challenge on many of these things to the WTO. There hasn't been a strategy really outlined. Why not? And what's being done to try and regain access to some of these markets, which I would argue for the most case aren't a quality issue. These are mistakes on government policy or government initiatives that need to be addressed.
So maybe a few points, and I'll try to be concise. I mean, I think that there's a wide range of challenges that we've faced, and you've identified a few, and your colleague did earlier. I think we try to look at the whole set of tools that we have to try to advance addressing them. So in the case of market access for our two shippers who have been shut out of China for canola seed. We have ended up with a WTO dispute resolution discussion. With respect to other countries, we've tried a range of tools. Obviously, with Italy, they do have, in the case of the European Union, coming in with replacement voluntary labeling rules that we're very sure, or the Europeans assure us, will replace the Italian measure in April of this year. And we've also seen, the quality of our durum wheat has been reflected in the fact that Canada's now got a #1 import share of the durum wheat market in Italy again. So, we are back into that market. I admit the levels are maybe not where they were 3 years ago, but we're the #1 import source there. We've worked with the sector, in the case of pulses in India, through a variety of tools to try and...
You should go to Italy right now.
Yeah, no.
So
thank you. I don't think they'd let me in, so
No. Do I have... that's okay. I was just wondering, something I want to kind of put on your radar. We've seen the report from officials that the administration costs for ag stability are at 24%, or $70 million of the budget. I know when we were in government, we kept that around 5 to 9%. Is there a reason why we've seen such a huge increase in the admin costs for ag stability? And are you able to give us numbers on how that has changed over the last few years?
Thank you, Mr. Barlow.
Thanks.
So
you can submit it,
yeah,
Chris, later
if you wish.
We can submit, and I'll come back to that later.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ellis for 5 minutes.
Are you taking my time?
So just to say, I think actually those administrative costs have been fairly stable over the last, I would say, going back to at least 2013 or earlier. So at around, for Agri-Stability, which is the most expensive program to run, at around, you said, I think 23-24% of something in that neighborhood, depending on the year. So that is high. I think, or it seems high at surface. It's a very tailored program, which I think is the challenge, because it's very producer specific. It's administered largely by our provincial colleagues, and so we have to work with them to figure out, are there ways that you could simplify the administration, right, to bring the cost down. But it has been, and I'm happy to share the numbers, it's been fairly stable for, I'd say, if not 10 years, close to that in terms of the level.
We talked earlier about farm income, and I know you do have probably some data on farm income. I don't think you probably have current over the last 2 years, but I just wonder how farm income in general, for the data that you've been keeping over the last, has it been up or down?
I mean, generally, I would say maybe the simple way to put it is we had, I think, a very good run of 6 or 7 years of good, strong increases in farm income across the country, and you're still seeing, I would say, in our export numbers overall, some strong revenue side sales increases. But what we've seen, and I think 2018 and 2019 definitely were, on the expense side, higher expenses driving up costs and bringing farm incomes back to the levels that they were sort of 4 or 5 years earlier.
Okay. Talked earlier about the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, and I guess the first round of that has already been announced. Question on that funding. Is that funding going to be year-round? And the second question, there's a second round of funding coming up. Could you explain the difference on the second round from the first round of funding?
Yeah, you want to talk a bit about that? Or?
So the first round of funding was about $4 million, and just to let you know, as at this point, we've already received 240 applications, projects representing pretty much the whole fund at this point, and the fund will be replenished next year. Yeah.
I was going to say that the first round was generally smaller projects, so was focused on smaller projects. The second round, which we will launch in the coming weeks and months, will also have a component for sort of larger projects that might bring together groups in a community or groups across communities to build kind of a bit more of a food system in a region.
Now, would you have know the amounts of the upper limits of that program in the second round?
I think that'll come out in due time, I think.
Okay. We've been talking about processing capacity and slaughterhouse closures. Just wonder if there's any money or any thoughts of money for slaughterhouses for innovation to get their processes maybe quicker, or to
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there is, again, we have programming agri-competitiveness at the federal level that certainly is there for slaughterhouses, but all processors to work on equipment and technology that's can be there to reduce costs or make their their processes more environmentally sustainable. Provinces also have programming under the various provincial programming under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership that can help with that.
Yep. Okay. And mention the Canadian Agriculture Partnership. That is a split with the province, I guess, is a 60-40 split,
Yep.
I take it. So we're adding money to that. Is the province picking up the difference, or why are we adding money, obviously, the funds?
In the supplementary estimates?
Yeah.
So that would be the federal share of money. So that the extra 55 million that's there, by and large, most of that money is for provincial programming, and that would represent our 60% share of programming. So those dollars would largely be matched by the province, or 40% to 60.
Okay, and my last question, there's revenues from sale of land and property transfers. I think the amount was around 320,000. Can you explain that? Are we selling property, or what that line is?
Yeah, so we when we do have surplus property, we look to sell it, and then we take the funding that we receive from those sales, and we reinvest them in our research centers and in the infrastructure.
Okay. How much time do I have left?
30 seconds, 35
Okay,
seconds.
I was going to get that to Mr. Drew, and I think he had a question.
Not in 30 seconds.
Not in 30 seconds, okay.
Not worth it.
That's good then, thank you.
Thank you. So now Mr. Barlow for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Just to go back to what we were talking about, Mr. Forbes there, I know in 2017 when we had the minister here, we talked about some of these trade issues, and at that time we had 34 agriculture trade experts in our consulates around the world, not foreign affairs people, but agriculture, which I know you know how important that is.
Yeah.
When we were having some issues, taking advantage of CETA now with the CPTPP, is that number still fairly consistent, or do we need to increase resources in some of those areas?
We have increased a bit, and I'm sorry I don't have the numbers with me,
that's
but
okay.
we have increased somewhat over the last couple of years. There was some money in the 2018 fall economic statement that we've used to beef that up. I think 6 or 7 would be my rough estimate of the numbers, but in that range. And I think overall beefing up the Trade Commission service more broadly.
We have had some issues from the cattle sector specifically on, and I know this is CFIA, but I'm just going to ask if you have some information on that a few weeks ago the minister announced that there would be a moratorium on the transition to the new transportation regs of 2 years. There seems to be some real confusion on, is this really a moratorium or is this a transition? Because some of the producers we had across the country have started to contact us saying, I thought this was a moratorium, but now I'm getting dinged with some of these new rules. What's going on? So I'm just curious, are there some aspects of the new transportation rules which are being enforced now and some are not? And is there going to be a bit of a campaign out there?
Can I bring a colleague from the CFIA to the table?
Perfect.
Is that fair? So Colleen Barnes, who's a colleague from CFIA.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So the transition is the feed, water, and rest time is that part of the regs that we're sort of going to focus on compliance, promotion, education, awareness building for the first 2 years. The rest of it does come into force. But as a general principle, we're working with the cattle industry and the other sectors as well. If they're hearing noise, there's concerns, to let us know. And we have working groups on all the sectors to deal with the issues because it is a big change. So we want to make sure we're working together to make sure it works for everybody. So there are parts of the regs that are now in force, but we're kind of trying to make sure there's good lines of communication open.
Okay. That's good to know. So there is a kind of an awareness campaign out there, because it maybe was lost in translation, but the announcement was a moratorium on these transportation regs for 2 years. So you can see why, maybe. But that's good to hear. And Mr. Forbes, maybe as we've talked about COVID-19, so the timing is maybe good, but the Ag Recovery Program is there as well, and this is supposed to be a pool of money set aside for natural disasters. As our producers have started to call this, the harvest from hell, and carbon tax, illegal blockades, railway strikes. It's hard to describe a more of a disaster than this year has been. Is there any flexibility, let's say, in terms of expanding the scope of agri-recovery? And I know my colleagues have mentioned, a pool of money there to deal with COVID-19, and that's really the essence of what agri-recovery is supposed to be. Is there any discussions going on to expand the definition or the accessibility, let's say, for agri-recovery to be able to address some of these issues?
So, I mean, I think when we look at the suite, as the minister said, we look at the whole suite, and certainly agri-recovery and the role it plays is part of that, the framework we have. I think we're certainly, open to ideas, certainly when we talk to the provinces about it, but certainly also from the committee, if there are ideas around how we might improve that. I think it is, it is something that as a group of federal and provincial officials, we certainly are, we're trying to find ways to make the system as responsive and as effective as possible.
Great. Yeah, just with everything that's going on, it would be nice something we could access really quickly to address some of these issues. The last question I had for you, Chris, was or Mr. Forbes, is just on some of these other issues that we are facing. And we talked about some of the transportation issues and the trade, but there's been a lot of talk about changing ag stability, and there's been a lot of processors or producers have been asking to increase that to 85 from 70 to 85%. But I guess unless we can get the provinces to agree with that, that's not going to happen. Has the landscape, I guess, now with a lot of these issues that we are facing, is that the reason why we've had such a push to ask for that increase to 85%? You talked about we had a pretty good 6 or 7 years there, and now things have changed substantially.
Yeah,
very short.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I think probably that's got to be one of the things, is the fact that the last 2 years have been, year and a half, 2 years has been quite difficult in parts of the country, and obviously that's when you look at these programs, I think there have been others who have been asking for the 70 to go to 85 for a number of years, but I would say definitely that the requests around that have grown in the last year and a half.
Forbes, Mr. Blois and Drouin, I believe you both have, whoever wants to go, 5 minutes.
We have how much time, Mr. Chair?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, cut me off at 2.5, and then I'll pass it on to Mr. Blois. Ms. Rudin mentioned the issue of access to incapacity building for cattle in eastern Ontario, and I know in central Manitoba it's an issue, and I know in eastern Canada it's an issue right now. I think, and I believe that there was a formal presentation given to the department about 48 hours ago, if not 24 hours ago. We've all met with the same folks. I'm just wondering, the government of Canada does not own any slaughtering capacity in Canada, right?
No, I mean, we have a little bit of research center capacity, but
yeah.
That's more, I mean, nothing.
Okay, and there is no, obviously, I'm just wondering about the funding potential programs if we were to approach a potential meat packer or slaughtering person that could do that here, a company that could do that in Canada. Where would we point them to? Like, is there cap funding that it would go through the province, or is there funds that's not part of your department, but perhaps I said? Or?
So, I mean, my general view is that when we meet with stakeholders, what we try to do is bring together the relevant federal and sometimes provincial partners to those discussions, right? So if there's a discussion of, about, let's just say, processing capacity of any kind in Ontario, we would try to engage with, provincial counterparts, with the Regional Development Agency. We'd probably bring in, as you mentioned, ISED, and talk, what's the proposal? What are the various federal programs that are out there, provincial programs, and what might be the right fit, right fit for those programs. I mean, that's the best way to describe the process, and that's why we engage with stakeholders when they have questions like this.
Okay, thank you. Cody, it's all yours.
Thank you, Francis. Just touching on the slaughterhouse capacity again, that's something that has come up in our dialogue and our discussion here in the committee. And I guess I learned in the lead up to this election the difference between the provincial and federal side in terms of jurisdiction. If a slaughterhouse wasn't meeting certain requirements, I assume that there's requirements under CFIA, and if they're not meeting them, that could result in a closure. Am I correct in saying that?
So yeah, I mean, a federally inspected slaughterhouse, which is one that where if you want your meat to cross outside the province in particular, you need to federally inspect it, and so a CFI would be the one inspecting and setting the standards around that facility.
So if one was to see a closure, I mean, there's probably different reasons why a particular slaughterhouse could close, but one of could be that they're not meeting the federal standard that's set under CFIA and the government.
So certainly, I mean, certainly food safety would be a yes.
One
primary
thing
concern.
that has also been a conversation, we've talked about price on pollution in agriculture and the role that agriculture can play. I've certainly talked about it at this committee about the fact that 10% of our GHG emissions in this country are tied to agriculture. And not that we should see that as a bad thing. We see that as an opportunity as our government tries to meet our Paris Climate Accord targets to make the investment in agriculture to help get farmers there. Can you speak to some of the programs that are out there, either on an efficiency side, directly on farm, innovation? I think you probably have about a minute left. Is that right, Mr. Chair?
Minute and a half, almost.
Minute and a half. There's 90 seconds to talk about the programs. I'd be interested in actually, having a briefing at some point if that would be something of value.
Well, certainly. I mean, I guess I would say, I think first we start with the research capacity, and I think a big focus of our research, climate change, reducing emissions, Minister mentioned, from livestock, but certainly also in our cropping processes and looking at ways we can, use technology or processes to reduce things like fertilizer inputs, which of course, have a cost benefit for producers as well as can reduce emissions. So we have the kind of research agenda, which we usually develop in concert with the sector to sort of make sure that we're targeting some of their priorities. I would then say we have a range of programs out there. I mean, the agricultural greenhouse gas program was the one that I mentioned earlier. We have a clean technology program, and then provinces, again, under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, environment and sustainability is one of the kind of priorities under that umbrella, and so provinces would have programs under the agricultural partnership, again, provincial programs that would also kind of double down on the federal efforts.
Certainly appreciate that, and I think I'm out of time anyway. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Monsieur Perron pour 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Perron, 2 minutes. Thank you. I'll bring you back to a question I put to the minister earlier regarding the other products under supply management for which there's no announcement. And you've reached some confidential agreements, so we can't learn those details. Can we expect some announcements soon, even if you don't provide specific dates? People are concerned and would like to have some news before the budget is tabled. I think the minister... Oh, I see. The same answer then. All right. I also brought up mental health with the minister. She said there would be money from the federal government. There would be funding from Health Canada as well. Have you considered a special program that would deal with mental health in the agricultural sector? Could you invest additional funding to help farm families? I think that most provinces already have programs for farmers and mental health. We could check. Please rest assured I'm not asking you to create another program because I'm from Quebec and I'm a member of the Bloc. I'm simply asking whether you could provide additional funding to support provincial initiatives. Under the Canadian Partnership for Agriculture, there is provision for provinces to receive money for programs. I'll bring you back to the issue of slaughtering that we were talking about. There's a problem for Quebec producers. Slaughterhouses might be closed sometimes for issues of profitability with the new animal transport regulations. The minister had said that there would be a stay of 2 weeks. I know that there are studies underway on the real impact of the new regulations, but I have 2 brief questions. Could we not support the establishment of new slaughterhouses, and will you take into account the results of the studies currently underway? As I said to Mr. Drouin and Mr. Blois, we will always work with the sector. We're always open to working with stakeholders to see how we can come up with programs that provide effective assistance. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'll have to interrupt.
Thank you, Chair. Our supply managed farmers have, taken 3 successive hits with the last 3 trade deals, losing parts of our domestic market share to foreign competition. Now, in August of 2019, the government made mention of the $1.75 billion fund. I think that's happening over 8 years to help supply manage dairy producers.
Dairy producers, yeah.
So is that only for CETA and CPTPP? It's not for CUSMA?
Indeed.
Okay, so CUSMA...
just for the two.
Just for the two,
yes.
Okay. So how will CUSMA be factored in, and what about our poultry and egg producers? What's going on with them?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to what the minister said.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of work done on looking at the impacts with the sector. I think I think the next question is, they'll be programming full and fair compensation the government's committed to, and that will come, when it's announced by the government. And I can't tell you any more than that. Okay,
so you don't have a timeline on where it's at right now?
It's a bit like Mr. Perron's question. I can't tell you when.
Yeah. Gotcha. So can you tell me how the 1.75 billion was calculated then?
So the 1.75 billion was calculated based on work that was done with the dairy producers, and the first tranche, 345 million payment, has already been made largely, I think, by the end of this fiscal year. But about 95 or 96% of the payments have already gone. I mean,
and is it direct cash transfer to a producer?
Direct cash transfer, and how the subsequent years will be rolled out will be determined with dairy producers.
Right. Okay. I think that's about it, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just wonder would it be okay if I ask one really quick question? It's not controversial in any way, shape, or form.
Go ahead.
It's never controversial. Never. Sorry, Mr. Forbes, I just forgot to ask. We know that the front of pack labeling was in the health minister's mandate letter. Any word on when or if that is actually going to be coming through? And the reason I ask is it has been listed by the United States as a potential trade irritant. We all know the President of the United States is very unpredictable. I would be very cautious to be adding a trade irritant right now as we go through CUSMA. Do you have any idea when and if this may come? I know that's a Health Canada issue.
Yeah, and I can't speak. I mean, it's similar. I can't really speak to specific timing other than we work pretty closely with Health Canada and Global Affairs, to understand all the issues around the proposals that were on the table and how they might change.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Forbes, Deputy Minister, and Deputy Assistant Christine Walker. Thanks for staying the full 2 rounds. And to everyone, wishing everyone a safe, healthy week. Take care of yourselves. Elbows up. This is when you can have the elbows up. Okay, we'll see you in a week and a half. Thanks.